If you've never fermented before, this is the easiest way to start. No vinegar, no canning, you just need a few simple ingredients. Let's get started. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of context. I grew up in France in the 90s and I was fed whatever my parents were able to feed me, and most of that food back then, it improved a little bit later when I was in my teens, but because their lifestyle was so hectic, my parents were commuting for almost 3 hours a day. My mom would come back home at like 7 o'clock, and that's the time in my home when we eat, so she would like rush and try to prepare something very quickly. So yeah, a lot of my childhood food that's gonna sound terrible, but was frozen things, and that's that was practical at a season of life when my parents just didn't have the time or the means to make anything else. So I grew up with like industrialized food for the most part, and it's only a couple of years ago that I learned that there was another way. That's when I was living in the Baltics. I was introduced to the art of fermentation, and I was completely blown away. I remember my husband and grandma used to have this weird jar on the shelf with like a slimy, squishy type of thing floating in a jar, and I was kind of grossed out, and I learned that was kombucha. And now we're completely obsessed with it. But yeah, I would say that my first introduction to the world of fermentation was through the kombucha SCOBY. So yeah, in my part of France, at least around the Paris area, I don't think that people have this connection to food, this connection to how nature can transform daily produce into rich and nutritious and gut healing bacteria. So it was kind of like mind-boggling to come to that realization, and I've been quite obsessed with it ever since discovering it. Some really good resources that you can start with if you want to get into fermentation. These books are from Sandor Ellix Katz. He's probably like the main guru in the States in regards of fermentation, and we have two of his books. I don't know if he has any more, but these books, they explore so many different types of fermentation, some Eastern Europe fermenting, but also some practices across Asia and Africa. Very good resources. I'm gonna link them down below in case you want to check them out. Since getting into fermentation, I've only been doing very simple things like sauerkraut. I actually have like a full jar in here. Sauerkraut, kombucha, some cucumbers, just like some simple lacto-fermentation. So I'm gonna quickly walk you through what lacto-fermentation is, because this is what we're gonna be focusing on today. Lacto-fermenting is basically introducing yeast that is present in the air into raw vegetables or different cultures. By fermenting, you are basically creating an environment that is prone for these yeast to kind of spread and multiply and transform the food into something that is very digestible and that is going to enrich your gut, healing you from the inside out. So it might sound quite intimidating. When I first got into it, I was like, I'm gonna poison myself for sure. But it's actually quite straightforward and very simple. So today I thought that I'd share with you kind of like the easiest way to get into lacto-fermentation using just a few ingredients that you might have in your garden or that you might be able to get from a local farmer or the shop if you don't have these options available. Luckily for me, we're in the middle of August and it's harvest time right now. So over the past couple of days, I've been picking these beautiful cucumbers from the greenhouse, and we usually eat them in salad. We don't have like that much to do many things with them. I wish we would have an abundance of them, but yeah, from time to time I just pick a handful, put them in the fridge, and then I know that I have enough to ferment. And the reason why I want to ferment these because of the benefits that the lacto bacilli, I think they're called, are gonna help everyone's gut in the family. In the past, people were mostly doing lacto-fermentation as a way to preserve food because they didn't have a fridge, so their options to preserve food was quite limited. They don't have freezers, deep freezers, freeze dryers. They could like dehydrate and transform the food. So lacto-fermentation was a great way to be able to extend the shelf life of these beautiful vegetables that were abundant in the summer. So by lacto-fermenting them, once the lacto-fermentation process is done, they could keep the jars in cool rooms like cellars. They would have been able to go and pick the jars whenever it was needed. What is cool with lacto-fermentation is that you're going to be able to witness the fermenting process over the course of a couple of days. For these little cucumbers, right now I don't know the temperature in the house, but it's probably around 23 degrees, which is really good for fermentation. You don't want your room to be too hot or too cold, because if it's too cold, it's not gonna ferment well, or it's not gonna ferment at all. And if it's too hot, it's gonna ferment very, very quickly, and you might not be able to be there when the food is ready, which, you know, it can be over fermented and it's not too good either. So this recipe is super easy. You need how many cucumbers you have. You're gonna need some dill flowers, or dill if you don't have access to dill flowers, some kind of leaves that are high in tannins. You can use some oak leaves, and what I have in abundance here is grape leaves, so I'm going to be using that. Some garlic, some seasoning. You can use caraway seeds, you can use corn pepper. You're going to need some salt, some water, and some garlic, and that's pretty much it. A jar, some kind of weight, and filtered water. Did I mention water? We are in the middle of building another raised bed right here because we had that extra in the garage and we didn't have the time to set it up. So we're gonna set it up, finish setting it up, and I'm gonna go get the Alright, so as for the seeds that you're gonna need, the seasoning, I'm gonna use whatever I have available. So we harvested some coriander seeds from coriander that bolted. We have some peppercorn in here, and we have some mustard seeds. So I'm gonna be using these alongside the dill flowers and the little grape leaves. So in addition to all of the ingredients, you're gonna need a big sized jar. This is a 2-liter jar from Le Parfait. So I'm gonna be using that. You're gonna need some kind of cloth to cover the top of the jar and some weight that you can insert inside. So I'm gonna use like a smaller jar or maybe a glass and add some water inside to press the weight down to prevent any mold from forming. So the first thing that we want to do is to prepare a brine, and the brine is the salty solution that is going to create the perfect environment for the bacteria to multiply. So you only need two things to make the brine. You're going to need some salt, some sea salt, and some filtered water. So for my recipe, I'm going to do about 2 liters of liquid because I'm gonna try to fill the whole jar. So I'm gonna prepare a 2 liters brine and add as many cucumbers inside as I can. The goal is for the cucumbers to be submerged fully and to have like a small amount of water on top of the last cucumbers. So I'm gonna start with my brine. I'm gonna go ahead and add 6 tablespoons of sea salt, and then I'm just gonna add my water on top. I'm gonna mix gently so the salt can start to dissolve. I'm gonna let it sit a little bit, and I'm gonna go ahead and start preparing my cucumbers. My little cucumbers have like little fuzzy bits in here, so I'm gonna remove those and chop off the ends of each cucumber as well. You want to work with a jar that is nice and clean and sterilized if you can. One easy way to sterilize your jar is to pop it in the oven at 150 degrees Celsius for about 15 minutes. This one I'm not gonna use because it's overgrown. You see how yellow it is, so I'm worried that it might be super bitter, and that's because we do not tend to water things enough in the greenhouse. Now that my jar is filling up quite nicely, I'm gonna start adding the seasoning. I'm gonna add a few coriander seeds, the dill flowers. I'm gonna add some peppercorn as well. 1, 2, 3. Alright, I'm gonna stop here because my jar is quite full already. I could keep going a little bit, but I think it's enough. So I'm gonna continue with adding the dill flowers, my little grape leaves, and then I'm gonna pour the brine over. That's how you're gonna witness firsthand how messy of a chef I am. This is gonna be messy. I'm gonna have to transfer the brine somewhere else because I'm gonna spill everything for sure. Let's do this. 1, 2. I'm gonna give my brine another stir to make sure that the salt has dissolved nicely, and we just pour the brine over. And I'm filling it up to about like 1 inch headspace. Not quite to the top, but about maybe 2.5 centimeters away from the top. So then when I'm gonna add my weight, not everything is gonna spill out of the jar. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this little glass in here so I can like keep the cucumbers fully submerged. And I'm gonna add some water inside to add extra weight, and then on top of that I'm gonna add a little cloth to keep like any fruit flies from wanting to get into it, because it's gonna start smelling funky in a couple of days, and we definitely do not want to attract fruit flies inside. I'm gonna clean up the mess that is right here and show you what the next step is. And that's pretty much it. You then gonna want to keep it in a, you're gonna want to keep it out of direct sunlight for a couple of days. I would say that in about 2 days it's gonna start getting bubbly and gonna start to smell a little bit funky. So that is totally normal. That means that the bacteria are getting active. I want to keep it out of direct sunlight for a couple of days. I would say that in about 2 days it's gonna start getting bubbly and gonna start to smell a little bit funky. So that is totally normal. That means that the bacteria are getting active. It's gonna start to bubble as well. I should probably put like a plate underneath just in case some water spills out of the jar. But yeah, it's gonna get bubbly and smelling a little bit funky. Yeah, you might have a little bit of foam on top, and that is totally normal. So just leave it there for, come back in 2 days to check. If you have bubbles, if it starts to smell funky, that means you're right on track. You can sample one and see how you like it. If it's still too salty, that means that it probably needs to ferment for a few more days. When you think it's done, that means that when your taste bud like it, you can go ahead and put it in the fridge. Remove the little jar that is inside. Seal it with the lid, and you can store it like this in the fridge for like quite a few weeks, if not for quite a few months. So yeah, I'm gonna get back to you in a few days to show you how it turned out. So we are a couple of days later. It's about 2 or 3 days after I last recorded, and this is how they turned out. They turned from a lovely shade of green to a more of a yellow, and I don't know if you can see. I'm gonna try to add a close-up for you to see, but there's a lot of bubbles coming out, so that's a very good sign of the fermentation. They're ready, so I'm gonna add my little lid and store them in the fridge so we can then enjoy them over the course of the next couple of days. And I said earlier that you can keep them in the fridge for a really long time, but they're so delicious that they usually don't last more than, I don't know, a couple of weeks at max. So yeah, I really hope that you have enjoyed this video and that it made you want to try this out. So this recipe, or this way of getting into fermentation, lacto-fermentation, is, I think, a great introduction to discovering this new world, and I really hope that it's going to encourage you to giving it a try and adding some delicious bacteria into your daily life. So talk to you soon.